A veteran of Ukrainian military intelligence shared interesting details that accompanied the latest events of the war in Ukraine. On November the 21st, Russia launched a missile strike on the Dnipro with an Oreshnik missile. After that, Putin threatened that such attacks could be repeated and even hinted at the possibility of strikes on countries that support Ukraine with long-range weapons. In fact, this was a threat to the United States and Great Britain. Anton Muraveynik, who is currently the head of the analytical department of the Center for Initiatives returnalive.in, Ukraine, compares the situation with the logic of nuclear deterrence. The parties demonstrate strength, but seek to avoid escalation because no one wants a global war. According to him, if a missile of this type had hit the EU, Western countries would have reacted decisively. In essence, Russia demonstrated a procedure reminiscent of a nuclear strike. The warhead was conventional, but the Russian leadership left Moscow and flew to the Urals at the time of the launch. It looked like a full nuclear attack algorithm was being worked out, with the evacuation of the leadership, warning of partners, and launch of the missile. Such actions are aimed at putting pressure on the West, and according to Muraveynik, this step really impressed some Europeans. According to Bloomberg, Russia may use the Oreshnik ballistic missile against Ukraine in the coming days. According to the US officials, Russia may launch another intermediate-range ballistic missile against Ukraine in the coming days. President Vladimir Putin likely only possesses a handful of the experimental missiles known as Oreshnik, which carry a smaller warhead than other missiles Russia has fired at Ukraine, the informed source said. At the same time, the US does not consider the Oreshnik ballistic missile to be a game-changing weapon, the official said. Vladimir Putin announced Russia's plans to deploy new Oreshnik ballistic missiles on the territory of Belarus. The Russians launched one of these missiles at Dnipro on November the 21st, 2024. Putin said this on December the 6th at a meeting with the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, according to the Kremlin. According to Putin, Russia has decided to satisfy Belarus's request and deploy tactical nuclear weapons on its territory. Since we signed an agreement on security guarantees today with the use of all available forces and means, I consider the deployment of such complexes as Oreshnik on the territory of the Republic of Belarus possible, the Russian dictator said.
Taiwan's Coast Guard released footage of officials monitoring what they said were Chinese Coast Guard ships sailing off the coast of Taiwan on Thursday. Officials said the ships were monitored and chased off in the early hours of Friday morning. It comes as China's military kept silent Friday on its large deployment of naval and Coast Guard ships off Taiwan this week, with its top spokesperson quoting an ancient strategist instead. Taiwanese officials have said that China was simulating a blockade with one string of ships off the island and a second one farther out at sea, in waters between Japan's Okinawa Islands and the northern Philippines. The Chinese Defense Ministry's first public comment on the activity was essentially a no comment. Wu Qian, the ministry's top spokesperson, included a famous quote from The Art of War, an ancient Chinese text on warfare strategy, in his remarks. The quote says military tactics adapt to changing conditions, just as flowing water does. He then said that the military will decide whether to hold an exercise based on its needs and the situation, and that, either way, the country's People's Liberation Army remains committed to opposing Taiwan's independence and to promoting its reunification with China. Taiwan is a self-governing island of 23 million people off China's east coast. The Chinese government claims Taiwan as its territory and says it must come under its control. The United States is embroiled in the dispute because it supports Taiwan's democratic government and is the main supplier of weapons for its defense. China's silence on its military activity this week contrasted with previous drills around Taiwan, which were reported by state media with dramatic graphics and images and seen as a public show of force directed at the island's government. Taiwanese officials described this week's activity as training, since there was no confirmation from China that it was holding drills. They said they were monitoring the training and viewed it as threatening. Taiwan's government was expecting China to conduct drills in response to a recent visit by Taiwan's president to Hawaii and Guam, an American territory in the Pacific.